Welcome to the third episode of Let's Program with Reader Programming. Last time, what we discussed was the basic Hello World program, and we took a brief look at the most basic of the objects that you can use in Java. The time before that, we also went into installing Eclipse, Juno, and the Java runtime. I have been trying to think of a new project that we can do in order to go into more of the more basic principles of Java, and I decided that it would be awesome if I would show you guys how to create a basic game where the computer's going to randomly look for a number between 2 points, 0 and whatever, and then the user's job is to guess what the answer is. We will be keeping track of how many times the user guesses, and we're going to be displaying this in a very basic window so that we don't have to use the console. And that's pretty much it. This is probably going to be a project that spans multiple episodes. Today we're going to look into the basic planning, and at the very least we're going to start a new project in our Eclipse workspace. For larger projects, what's generally done is that the programmer writes a UML page where it is discussed what classes do what. This is good for larger projects where there's also a team involved, or even just for your own personal use. But for such a small program, I find this to be superfluous. So what I did instead, and normally I would just do this on a piece of paper with just old school pen and paper and possibly a pencil here and there, I'd write down the names of the classes that I want and basically what they should be doing. In this case, I am going into this program project aware that I'm going to have at least 2 classes. The one class is going to have the entry point to the game. The other object, the other class, is going to be the graphical user interface. Generally what I'd also do is, in addition to the user interface, the actual window program object, I'd also have another background object that would have all of the logic to it, all of the game logic. I am going to skip this for the sake of simplicity, but know that generally I personally would use at least 3 classes for this program. So let's look at what we have here. We have the graphical user interface, which is going to be called Game Window. I also have written down that it's going to be implementing an action listener. An action listener is an interface that will be used by the buttons. We're also going to be using Swing today, so Java has two user interface classes, the old one, AWT, and the new one, which is Java Swing. I personally have used Java Swing the most. I find it to be the better of the two, and pretty much Swing inherits from AWT. Not that you need to know that at this early stage in the project, but no, there's 2 different packages for output in user interfaces. What functions, what methods we're going to be needing? We're going to be needing a constructor, obviously. We're going to need to implement the action listener method, which I believe is action performed, but we'll get into that in a moment once we open up Eclipse. And we're also going to have some sort of function that processes what happens when there's a guess, when the user wants to do something. This obviously is not a full list of everything we're going to need. It is just a starting off point. It's just a jump point. Number game is going to be our entry point. The only method that we really know that we're going to need is main. A lot of times, and for such a small program like this, the main method could go into the game window class, but again, that really doesn't fit into the object-oriented programming way of thinking. It doesn't really fit into the philosophy, because in all honesty, game window should only be concerned with, let's design the window. So we're going to have a separate class for number game, not that big of a deal. All the way to the right, I have a very basic idea of how I want my window to look. I want to have a title, the number game, and then I'm going to have a scrolling area here where the user will be able to see what it's going to be like a console readout. Basically just a log of everything that the user has guessed, what the answer is going to be, and basically just how high the user should guess. Under that, we're going to have an input area where the user can make their guess. And below that, finally, we're going to be having our buttons guess and end game. We can also then later to decide what end game really is going to do. Is end game going to offer the user a chance to restart the game? Is end game going to just close the window? We can discuss that later, and we can even change that later. But for right now, just a very brief overview of what we are planning on doing. Very important. Alright, so let's close Paint here. And let's go into Eclipse. First thing we're going to do, as stated, is start a new Java project. We can just call this the number game. We can click Finish. Our next step is going to be to create a new package. And as I stated in the last episode, this package is going to be our domain name. Now a lot of people might be asking, well, I don't have a domain name and I don't belong to a company that has a domain name. What do I use then? You can basically just use anything that would be unique, and most of the time it has your name, and it really just depends on if it's going to be something that's just for you, or is it going to be something that you're going to publish and let other people use. If it's something that you're going to let other people use, then you really should be careful with what you use as your package name. For right now though, COM Reader Programming. Now I'm going to click Finish here. I also want to show you really quickly what this package looks like. We're going to close that then. Again, I'm saving this on the computer. I'm saving it in Documents, in Workspace, and then here we have a list of all of our projects that we're currently working on in this workspace. Metadata is used by Eclipse. Please don't touch that, just leave it alone. When we go into the number game now, we're going to see a couple of folders: Settings, Bin, and Source. Settings, again, please don't go in there, just leave it the way it is. Bin is going to be for the .class files, which are the bit files. The source is going to contain all of our Java files, and that's the source code. So we go into source, and we can see now com is one folder, one directory. Reader is the next. Programming is yet another directory. And here is where all of the classes will be that we create in this package. So we can just minimize this for now so that we can also quickly open it up later. Now let's go into this package and let's create our first class. Our first class is going to be number game. In number game, we're going to make a main method, and that's going to be it for now. We're going to be inheriting from object only, and we can just click finish. I'm going to say that this isn't enough for me for packages. Now normally for such a small program I just keep it all here in this one package and I wouldn't make another one. However, to show you what I do for larger projects is I then create another package. It's going to be found in ComReader programming, but it's going to be in GUI for graphical user interface. And here I can create a new class, and we can name this class Game Window. Now, this is where things are going to be a little different. Our superclass is not going to be object anymore. Because we want to have a window, I want to inherit from JFrame. When I do this, I'm then going to have access to all of the members of the JFrame object. Now, what does that entail? Well, for that, we can quite easily look this up on Google. I am now going to type in Java 7 documentation, and then you could also download it. I just like looking it up online. We're gonna open this up. The stuff that I want to look up is in Swing, and I'm gonna click on documentation. Let's just do a search. On the top here, we're going to see how everything is inheriting from each other. As I had said before, Swing inherits from AWT, and we can see that very easily here. And we can also see how everything is an object because everything inherits from this base class. Here we'll see all of the main information. We'll see that it extends frame, and we'll see that it implements a whole bunch of interfaces. We're also going to see that it has some nested classes, a lot of stuff we don't really need to know, at least not right now. We're going to see that it has a couple of constructors. This is going to become very important when we build our constructor. And here you'll see a whole bunch of methods that this class has. I'm not going to go through all of this. You can go through it at your leisure. Again, it's not that hard to find. So we're going to minimize that, go back into Eclipse. Now, I told you that we need to implement Action Listener. It's also not hard, so we're going to go into Add Interface. Now we're going to type in Action Listener. Now, down here we have the ability to create a main method, but we don't want to do that, so let's get rid of that. We, in this case, do not want to inherit the constructors from the superclass. And we do, however, want to inherit the abstract methods. This is going to automatically give us all of the methods contained within Action Listener that we have to fill out before we can continue. One last thing that I am going to do, though, in this case, is I'm going to click Final here. That just says that this is the final JFrame, the final window, and that no other class can inherit from this class. Now I'm going to click Finish. Now what we see here is that we are importing other packages. We are also importing a swing package. We are extending the JFrame object, which means we are inheriting from the JFrame. And we are implementing, we are using the Action Listener interface. We see here that we have a warning. And when we put our mouse on this warning, we're now going to see what this is. We don't need to go into what the serializable interface does. I believe that's going to be too much for right now. Just know that you can just click on it and the quick fix will come up, and we can say here that we should generate either a default serial version or generate a serial version. I personally don't see how that's... I really don't know what the big deal is between the two. I also really don't have a need for the serializable interface. I'm not going to be creating more than one version of this game that I'm going to have to worry about compatibility between different versions of this program. So it really doesn't matter to me at the moment. I'm just going to click Add Generated Serial Version ID. And then it just automatically does it. Now we still have a warning, so let's take a look at what that is. Same thing, we just haven't saved. Alright. We are now warning free. First thing I'm going to do is I am going to create my constructor. I'm going to say that it is public. And to create the constructor, we do not have to, in fact we cannot say what it's going to deliver back. We're just going to write the name of the class exactly the way the class is declared. Control spacebar will finish it for you or give you ideas what you could possibly be meaning there. Alright, so we now have our constructor. Now, I showed you before in the documentation that there's constructors for the JFrame. We actually need to call that here in order to make sure that the JFrame itself is made the way it's supposed to be. So in order to do that, we're going to call super, which calls the super class constructor, the class that we are inheriting from. I also showed you how the JFrame has more than one constructor. We can use any one of them. So I can go here and I can actually give it a title, say the number game, and that's going to work here. That works again because I showed you right here that the JFrame constructor can also take a string, and that string is going to be the title of the window. We can close that now. Let's take a look at our paint document and see what other methods we wanted to put in. We have our constructor, we have our action performed method. We now want to put in process guess so that we don't forget it. So let's go ahead and do that. This is going to be a private method because other classes should not have access to this method. And it's going to deliver a Boolean back, whether the guess is successful or not. And we're going to also give it a name now, process guess. It needs to return a Boolean, so we're just going to say return false for now until we finish this. And we can also give it a to-do tag that says finish me. Now let's look at what the game window needs. We said already that it's going to need a scroll area, and this can be sometimes a little more difficult for fresh programmers, people who don't really know Java that well. We're actually going to create a JText area, and we're going to call this output. And then we're going to create something called a JScroll area, a JScroll pane, I'm sorry. And we're going to call this output panel. And again, if you forget the new word, keyword, it's not going to work. We're also going to need an area where the user can say what he or she'd like to guess. So let's say private JText field input is equal to new JText field. We're also going to need two buttons. I'm going to intentionally just call it end and not end button because I want to show you later something very cool that you can do with Eclipse. And this equals a new JButton. Now my button should have text. I can set this later on down here where I call guess button dot set text. But I can also do this in the constructor, and I will do that now. End is also going to have some text, and we're going to call this just end game. Now let me show you how this looks right now. We're going to open up the new game class, assuming that Eclipse plays along. And we have our main method right here. So we're going to just get rid of this to do tag. We're going to create a new game window. And then we're just going to set that to visible. And that's all that I'm going to do right now. When I press play, I'm going to see that I have a window up here, and it looks really like nothing. I can make it bigger. We can see that it definitely does have a title, and the title is The Number Game. We can minimize it. We can make it bigger. And of course we can close it. Now be careful, because something that you can also see right down here, it's still there. You can't see it, but this thread is still running, and we need to close that. Best way, easiest way in this perspective is just to hit terminate, which is just the stop button right here on the console. So let's hit close. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to make this actually kind of safe, and we're going to set a default close operation. Then we're going to give the constant, which is equal to exit on close. And this just kills our thread. Exit on close. And then when we hit play, we're going to see that it's still here, but when we close it, we're going to see that the thread was terminated and it no longer exists. Okay, so now we see that we have our window, but it doesn't look like anything. So how do we do it? Well, there are two options in Eclipse. There is something specific, don't really remember what it's called, but it's pretty much a graphical user interface where you can create your user interface. I, however, really like to do the code myself. I find that it creates you can pretty much make the code a lot cleaner if you write it yourself. And that's what we're going to be doing today. I think that GUI design really isn't something for true beginners, but I just wanted to briefly go into what it looks like and stuff. Basically just a very overall idea. If you guys wish for me to do more of a Java Swing series, I can. Uh, if I get enough requests for it, either per email or on comments, I will do it. Right now, though, we're going to stick with making our window by code. Now, the next important thing that we're going to have to do is set our layout manager. Basically what a layout manager is it defines the basic rules on how our window is going to look. There's more than just one. In this early stage of the tutorial, I really do not want to go into all of the manager layout, really the contents of manager layouts and what they all do. I'm just going to say that for right now, we are going to use something called a border layout. Now, a border layout is going to separate our window into north, south, east, west, and center. Pretty simple. Probably one of the more basic layouts, pretty easy to do. So we have our border layout. Now what do we want to do? Well, we want to put our output panel into the north section. So we're going to just call add. We're going to put in the panel, and we're going to then say where it should go. And for that, there is a constant under border layout, and it is north. Now we are going to put in our input area. We do that the exact same way. And we are going to give it the location of center. We're going to leave it at that, and let's take a look at what it looks like now. First thing you can realize and see is that it's still really small. We don't really see anything at first, and we actually have to make it bigger ourselves. That's, of course, not so nice. We also see that the JText area is really small, but yet the text field is really huge. We also see that we can type things into the text area, but we also see that the JText pane, or scroll pane, does show up, and we can scroll. It just doesn't make any sense. So let's fix a couple things. First off, what we're going to do is we're going to change the size of our text area. To do that, we're just going to say output set preferred size. Set preferred size takes a dimension object as a parameter. So we're just going to make a new one, new dimension. And we see here that dimension can take two arguments, the width and the height. So let's make it 500 pixels wide, and let's make it 100. And let's make it 150 pixels tall. Alright, good. Now we have a output that has a specific size. Sounds good. If we were to start it right now, though, we would find that it's still just really small and in the corner and really nothing too much to see. However, to fix that, we're going to call the JFrame method pack. And pack takes the preferred dimensions, the preferred sizes of all of the components, and creates the window at the correct size. So when we start this now, we're going to see that we actually have a window that we can work with. Let's go on a little bit further, and let's put in that output is not an object that the user should be able to change or alter or anything. We're going to call setEditable, and we're going to call false. Now let's also make sure that the user knows that he's not supposed to do anything, and let's also change the color. Now output is going to be showing up in such a way that the user cannot write anything in that area, and it's also going to be a light gray color. Now you might say, hold on a minute, when you just came up with the color here, you saw light gray twice. You saw light gray once all small, and another time you saw it all capitals. And that's because of the convention change that was done between the very earliest versions of Java. Both will work, but the used convention is that constants should always be written in capital letters, and they use an underscore to separate the different words within the variable name. As I said, both will work. I prefer to stick with the Java convention of all capitals. You can do whatever you wish, but remember that also most companies will expect that the programmer uses the given convention. So that's why I use the capital. Alright, so when we look in our Paint document, we're going to see that we have the title, we have this, we have the input, we're missing the buttons. Alright, well, in order to do that, we're going to have to do something special, and we're going to have to create another panel. In this case, we're going to call it Button Panel. And JPanel can also take an argument, which would be, in this case, the layout manager we want to use. So we're going to say new grid layout. And grid layout does nothing but create like a typical table type layout. Now, we didn't get to see what these arguments are, so let's just look in the documentation. And this is a long list of all of the different classes. I actually click Control F, well I press Control F, then I type in grid layout, and then we see here grid layout. And again, this will only be shown if you have frames selected up here. And here we can see the different ways that this looks and so on. And we see here finally the first parameter is an integer. All of these are integers, and it's how many rows, how many columns, the horizontal gap, and the vertical gap. So we're going to be giving the parameters 1, 2, 10, 10. Then what we can do is we can call this panel, and we can add the guess button. And then we can add the end button. And then we can add this panel to the J-frame. And we want this to be located south. How does this look now? Exactly the way we wanted it to look like. Maybe not exactly, but we're getting there. We can close that, and again we see that the program is then terminated. I had said earlier that I was going to only type end here and not use my personal convention of saying that it's a button, because I wanted to show you something. Well, let me show it to you now. I'm first going to click on end, and because I have this button pressed up here, both occurrences of this button, of this variable name, are highlighted. You can also see it here because it shows it here too, up here and down here. We also see yellow, meaning it's a warning, and we also see our two blue to-do stubs. But again, that's not what I wanted to show you. We click on end, then we right-click, and then we go into Refractor and rename, and then we can literally type in the new name, hit enter, and all occurrences of this variable name will be changed within this document. Then to close today, I just also wanted to show you this file again. Again, we're going in to our workspace. We can click on the number game project. We can then click on the source, com, reader, programming. And then here we also see that we have another package GUI, and we also have a class here, number game. We can actually then open this up. Sometimes you actually have to click that you want to open it up with Notepad. But we can then see that it's just a regular text file. And we can read it. We can even continue working on it in Notepad. Don't know why you would want to, especially when Eclipse is free. But other than the compiler, all what you really need to know is the language very well, and you can program with a simple Notepad. So let's conclude for today. Basically what we looked at was planning for a project. We looked into what we want to do, how I want the window to look, and then we very briefly went into going into the swing design and creating a very basic window. Next time what we're going to be working on is putting some functionality into this window and maybe even getting into some game logic. I hope you guys enjoyed the third episode of Let's Program, and I hope to see you all next time. Comments, suggestions, ideas, requests, please either write to me at greg@reader-programming.com or leave me a comment. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time.